Hello, my name is Peter Alter. I'm the Chief Historian and Director of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History. In this segment, I'll be interviewing folks related to the Lawndale pop-up spot, and they are Jay Simon, curator and photographer, Chelsea Ridler, co-founder of the Lawndale pop-up spot, and Jonathan Kelly, also co-founder of the Lawndale pop-up spot. If we could start with Chelsea, and if you could each tell us a little bit about yourselves, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Ridley. I'm the co-founder of the Lawndale pop-up spot. Jonathan and I have been working on this project since we met in grad school at UIC in the fall of 2016. We are museum professionals that just wanted to think about how to create a museum in a community setting. And so that's how our work has brought us here. Outside of that, I'm a museum professional. I'm a cat lover. I am a youth worker, and I'm very invested in the city of Chicago and love this city very much.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. So a good segue from Chelsea to you, Jonathan.
Sure, I'm Jonathan Kelly, other co-founder of the Lawndale pop-up spot. While I'm originally from Denver, I've been in Chicago over 20 years, and like Chelsea, have fallen in love with the city. We came up with the idea of this community museum in a shipping container that was going to be a space for residents of the community of North Lawndale specifically to tell their stories, to explore ideas connected to their lives. And that's really what our goal has been. My background has been in community organizing and the library world. So it was sort of an interesting transition to get into the museum world. And, our museum is pretty unorthodox. We don't have collections. We don't have, a second room. We're small, very community-based, free, and really exploring what it means to be a cultural institution in a community and to be as much reflect the voice of the community as much as possible.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Jay, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure, no problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Simon. I am a curator, photographer, and as well as a North Lawndale resident. I've been living in North Lawndale. I'm 32 years old. I've been living in North Lawndale for 31 years. It's only 1 year I didn't live in North Lawndale. I moved to Willowbrook. I was in college. But I have a very big heart when it comes to my community. I would consider myself a historian. Before I started doing photography, I would see my father reading history books. So that really led me to want to learn about different types of history, particularly neighborhood history, different old organizations and things of that nature. So prior to working with Jonathan and Kelly in the Lawndale pop-up spot, I was working with the School of Art Institute on a project that I did called Father's League, because I had lost my father at a very young age at 22, and I became a father at 28 years old. So it was a little scary, not having a father needing guidance or wanting guidance, to, with now raising a daughter or having a daughter. So through that experience, I decided to create this father community and showcase fathers, whether they're African American or really just men in general who were fathers, showcasing them in a positive, productive light. Because dads sometimes get a bad rap for not being the best dads, but there were some really great dads out here, and I wanted to kind of showcase that. So that's what that allowed me to do, and it allowed me to connect with Jonathan and Kelly to do the things that we're going to be talking about.
And Chelsea.
Chelsea, I'm sorry, that we're going to be talking about.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Jay. That's great. So not everyone listening and watching may be exactly familiar with what a pop-up spot is. So if you guys could, one of you self-select to tell us what the Lawndale pop-up spot, what it actually is physically.
Sure. Yeah, the Lawndale pop-up spot is a shipping container museum. So we have repurposed an old shipping container, one of like a freight container, and turned it into a museum space. So we are this museum. We're also located in a community garden. And so we're really trying as much as possible to be centered around North Lawndale. Our location is 16th and Spalding. So we're in the Spalding Memorial Garden, which is overseen by an organization called Gardeneers. It's an incredibly giant lot with a ton of natural resources. Food grows there. It's a great resource for the community. And we're just excited to be just a piece of this amazing space.
All right, thank you. How did you, Jonathan touched on this a little bit in in his introduction. I'm wondering how you three as a group came up with this idea. As you also mentioned, it's somewhat unorthodox for a museum in a shipping container. So give us a little bit of idea about the origins of the idea, please.
Yeah, so in 2016, Chelsea and I were working on a project. We were in a class together on decarceration, thinking about people reentering from incarceration, how many of them enter into neighborhoods such as North Lawndale or other West Side neighborhoods, and what they were entering back into, what the life was going to be like for these newly reentered folks, their adjustment periods, the connections that they would make. And so we connected with an organization called the National Alliance for the Empowerment of the Formerly Incarcerated, which does great work all over the city, but particularly on the West Side, for sharing skills, making connections, building up people. In particular, so many African American men are part of the carceral system. And so when we started thinking about how we could take our museum studies scholarly work and bring it to bear for a project, that was our first point of connection. So we started meeting people in North Lawndale, building relationships, taking part in committees that were doing neighborhood development work, and just learning and meeting. And when the project with the National Alliance for the Empowerment of the Formerly Incarcerated didn't work out, we then started thinking about what other spaces or opportunities could exist for us to continue this work. And that's when the shipping container idea came to us from a friend of ours who's from a little village just south of North Lawndale. So we ran with that. We partnered immediately upon thinking about it with Gardeneers, and they've been great hosts and partners with us. And so we started in 2019, purchasing the shipping container, building it out, putting insulation in and flooring, painting it, and then opening our doors with an exhibit that was curated by West Side teens who are part of an After School Matters project. And they did a beautiful exhibit in just a few months, from inception to execution, about in the community, in their personal lives, what safety means, etc. Did I freeze up?
You did. It was about safety. That was the part that froze. Yeah. So the exhibition was all about instead of thinking about violence, which is the narrative that a lot of people like to espouse about the West Side, flipping that and talking about what makes youth feel safe, what makes people feel safe, what are positives and benefits to the neighborhood. To build on what Jonathan said, I just want to say that the Lawndale pop-up spot is by and for the community. So when you ask what is the Lawndale pop-up spot, why are we the Lawndale pop-up spot? We are the Lawndale pop-up spot because a resident suggested that be our name. we have a blue shipping container because a youth suggested that be our color. All of the things that we are is because of what the community suggested for us.
All right, thank you. So I want to kind of move into learn about your current exhibition, Lawndale, A Living History. And then I'd also like to hear specifically kind of Jay's work with his photography and his curation. So if Chelsea or Jonathan, if you could tell us a little bit about this particular exhibition, Lawndale, A Living History, that would be great.
Sure. After the success, I would say, of our first exhibit, we were thinking really about, we spoke with members of the community. We have basically an advisory team that helps us think through what our exhibits and programs are going to be. And the theme of people telling their stories and featuring residents through photo seemed like a great next step for us. In a way, kind of to thank the community for welcoming us, since neither Chelsea nor I are North Lawndale residents. In a way, it was a way to provide thanks. We had previously met and worked with Jay. He was the photographer for our opening and really liked his photographic eye and really liked his vibe. Jay's got a great vibe. So that's when we approached him about, possibly photographing but also curating this exhibit that turned into not just a photo exhibit, but photo and oral history, as well as artifacts and video, multimedia. And so that was the impetus. And then, yeah, it's just a lot of meetings and thinking and collaborating and fundraising and work.
Absolutely. All right, Jay, Jonathan kind of set you up well. Could you tell us about your work on the project, your photographer's process, and your role in the exhibition Lawndale, A Living History?
Sure. I can remember the first time actually meeting Jonathan was in the MLK exhibit center, and very interesting. We were doing some work out of there. I believe it was with the Lincoln Park Zoo, and just had, like Jonathan said, like his vibe. We got to talking about some things, and I remember just working on the prior project that I mentioned, being a grant awarded recipient as a 2019 visiting artist in residence. My work was shifting into telling stories through my photography. Portraiture is pretty much the medium that I kind of am very strong in. I've been working in photography as a freelance photographer for 8 years now, and the majority of my work has been dealing with portraiture and really being able to gather people's stories. So when Jonathan and I got to talking, and he got to mentioning how he wanted to highlight elders, giving people who normally don't get a chance to tell their stories out into the community, would be able to also include the youth, to be able to ask these questions and to curate this project where they can learn and build this bridge. So me being, again, a millennial and being someone who is very passionate about his neighborhood, and also and very interested in history. I really love history and being able to tell stories. I thought that this was the next step for me to be able to do that. Once being able to photograph fathers, now being able to photograph elders, but also being able to curate and work with other youth to curate, to tell these stories. In terms of my process, one of the things that I focus on normally is just getting people comfortable, warming up to them, asking them different questions that I'm interested personally, what I mean? Because I've been living there, I'm 32, but if I'm interviewing someone that's lived there twice as long as I've been alive, I have certain interesting questions, thought-provoking questions that get them not just to say, one answer words, but to dig deeper and to open up. And I like to capture people in candid moments. A lot of the photos that, if you look at the pop-up spot, are very candid. Capturing people in the essence of just asking them questions and seeing them at the right moment of them doing something that's unique and being able to capture that moment. So that's what I would say is like the main basis of my process. But so yeah.
Okay. Just one unscripted follow-up. What is it like for you, Jay, as a photographer to capture those kind of behind the scenes personal moments of your subjects?
It means a lot to me. The behind the scenes moments of my subjects, uh, really because it's like, particularly I remember speaking with Mr. Charlie Wilson, and like just him being in business for 29 years, he was able to pour so much into me, in terms of just being a family man, being a businessman, being on like just being in the community, invested, why he was there. So being able to really capture and hone in and really appreciate like what he's saying and someone actually living there, that just means the world to me. And that's why this project for me is so special, because it's not just like, oh, I'm taking a photo and moving on to something. It's these people are still here. They wake up every day and drive past and see their photos, and they told me, like, man, thank you for, doing this, so it means so much. It's so much deeper for me.
All right. Thank you. That's great. A wonderful insight. All three of you have mentioned working with youth on this project. And we have at sometimes our projects at Chicago History Museum, we've worked with youth. And we often get the question, like, why are you doing that? Why are you working with youth? We have our own answers. I'd like to hear kind of from all of you why you decided to work with youth and what that was like. And let's start with Chelsea, Jonathan, and then Jay.
Yeah, I made a professional career out of working with youth. It's very important to me to be able to incorporate youth voice into everything that I do, because I feel that a lot of the times the youth have a lot of really important insight that is often overlooked. One of the things that I think is super important and also just amazing about the Lawndale pop-up spot is how intergenerational we are, and how no matter the genesis of our project from when Jonathan and I first met to now, we have always wanted to be intergenerational, to be able to involve youth and elders, adults together to have conversations, to share learning. There's a lot of things that adults can learn from youth, just like youth can learn from adults. And so making that a core part of everything that we do is super important, and excites me about our project. Youth are also just like cool and keep us interesting, and they know how to like make things more exciting and fun. For people who haven't worked with youth, give it a shot. Go volunteer somewhere where you get to talk to young people, because they're very funny and they have a lot to say.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of energy sometimes that older folks don't necessarily have at different stages in life. Jonathan, thank you, Chelsea, for that. That was wonderful. Jonathan, could you tell us a little bit about your experiences working with young people on this project?
Yeah, so, this project turned out to be a lot more challenging with regard to working with youth than anticipated, because our plan was to work with all of our partners. We've had great collaborating partners in this project, including the Chicago History Museum, the Chicago Public Library, the North Lawndale Historical and Cultural Society, this group, Men Making the Difference. And our plan was to, once a week, all spring long of 2020, to have a different partner come by, talk to the students about their element of this exhibit and their ideas for the work, and then to do work on practicing photography, practicing oral history, etc. And then I don't know if you heard, but there was a pandemic that shut everything down our second week, right after our second week of meeting. And things changed immediately. And we really had to work on the fly, both to reconceive of our exhibit, because at one point it looked like there wouldn't be an exhibit at all, but also how to keep youth engaged. So we moved it to Zoom. We still had people come and talk, including Peter, and still had them be involved in thinking through the exhibit, helping curate the exhibit, conducting some of the interviews with our partners at
StoryCorps.
Yeah, conduct some of the interviews with our partners at StoryCorps, et cetera. So, you know, like I said, it turned everything on its head. And if we'd had a little bit more forewarning, things might have looked a little bit differently. Our hope was to have some of the youth actually take the photos, but we didn't want to do the in-person things. We were thinking initially that we were going to take photos of people in their homes. Instead, we took them all outside. And not only did we have them outside, which turned out to be great for photos, good lighting, but we also took the exhibit outside. So while initially we were going to have the exhibit be large photos inside the Lawndale pop-up spot, they turned out to be all outdoors, and not just at the Spalding Memorial Garden, but in several spaces throughout North Lawndale.
All right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Being a shipping container museum and being sort of like a community grassroots type thing, we could be that nimble. We could take everything that we were planning on doing and just figuring out how to put it on the outside. That's like the really fun thing about the Lawndale pop-up spot, just being able to, you know, brainstorm and think about how to do things and let the sky be the limit. Why not mount exhibitions outside rather than inside? Why not weatherproof things and make it free and make it accessible like that? The other thing is that one of the things that we make sure to do at the Lawndale pop-up spot is always pay all of our collaborators, because we see arts and museum-based work as jobs. And so anytime we work with people, we want to make sure that we're paying them to do this work so that we could show, especially youth, pathways into careers in arts. A lot of the youth that we've worked with have not seen museums as a professional career or arts as a professional career. And this is really showing people, hey, people do this. You could have this as a job. And as a person who works with teens pretty regularly, I see a lot of focus on like business and accounting and science, like very practical careers, practical in quotes careers. We're really trying to open the door to show people that careers in arts are possible.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that additional information, Chelsea. I want to bring it back to Jay in terms of sort of his experiences as curator and photographer for the exhibition Lawndale: A Living History, working with youth. What was that like for you, Jay, as pretty much a lifelong resident of North Lawndale?
Honestly, it was when Jonathan first told me about the project, I thought it was just going to be, you know, photographing elders. But when he said, you know, we were thinking about having some intergenerational component where youth can interview and they can learn photography, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this gives me the ability, one, to, you know, showcase, not only showcase my work, but to teach youth, you know, skill sets, you know, that could, you know, get them income, you know, on how to do a craft that is very respectable and you know, that is very valuable. It made me feel honored, you know, to be able to be someone living in the community, giving to the community, and then teaching individuals, young youth in the community, you know, how to do something that I enjoy. So it was definitely something that made me feel good and proud. But when the pandemic happened, because we were initially meeting the youth at the Chicago Public Library Douglas branch frequently. That was like our initial process, like to gather the youth, to get them to come together, and they were coming, and then the pandemic happened, and we had to adjust. And I would say that the adjustments that we made worked out pretty good. What I mean? Because it turned out, again, as Jonathan and Chelsea said, it turned out bigger than what we initially planned, because everything was indoors at first, inside, photos inside. And this happened, and it allowed us to literally think outside the box. What I mean? Like, if I could use those words, that's what it caused us to do. So I'm you know I I didn't I'm not gonna say I'm glad that the pandemic happened, because people lost their lives. What I mean? But in the case that with our plans and what we were anticipating, it kind of helped us to think outside of just being indoors. So
All right. Thank you. Thanks very much, Jay. Now I'd like to hear a little bit from each one of you about the content of the exhibition itself. If you could think of what's your favorite or most impactful story or interview or photograph or sets of photographs, for each one of you to talk a little bit about that. Let's start with Jonathan, Jay, and then we'll wrap that question up with Chelsea. So Jonathan, favorites, most impactful stories, interviews, photos?
Well, probably apropos of, am I frozen again? I'm
No.
okay. Okay. Most apropos of this time of year, some of the stories that hit on Martin Luther King, his time in North Lawndale, and the impact of his being here, but also of his assassination on individuals' lives, were extremely powerful to me. So, like I mentioned, we worked with StoryCorps to do the oral history recordings, the interviews. Jay and I and one of our teens took turns interviewing the subjects, and Doris Calhoun and Charles Jenkins are two stories who just had this immediacy to them, and colorful detail. Um, Doris grew up in the church, Stone Temple Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King had an office and spoke, and the lectern that he spoke at is still at the museum, and they are part of this annual celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and legacy. So hearing her story, not just of Dr. King, but of his father, Daddy King, preaching to her in that church, and Mahalia Jackson singing, and Emmett Till's mother, Mamie Till, coming to the church and explaining why it was important to her to have Emmett Till's casket be open at his funeral so that the world could see what it had done to her son. I mean, that just gave me chills. But then also hearing Charles talk about the assassination of Dr. King, where he was, how he reacted, how it felt for him, and how scared but also angry he was, and how it impacted his life going forward. And to this day, he's a board member of the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, and does really powerful and impactful work in his community and throughout the city, and is a role model. And so those were two, in terms of their stories that we collected, that were, I think, most impactful for me.
Great. Thanks very much, Jonathan. Let's move over to Jay. Essentially the same question. Most impactful stories, photos, interviews that you'd like to talk about?
Definitely. I would definitely say that Doris Calhoun, as Jonathan mentioned, her story is just the fact that her history with being with Stone Temple, and just sharing, what it was like to hear Daddy King preach. You know what I mean? Like, she was just talking about, King's father. And you know, also I think one of the biggest thing for me, in terms of like when we toured her inside of the church, her talking about the doors and how they're so that the type of wood it was is like it's very hard to find, is rarity. And then also talking about like just the cheers that once were there, and then the architecture of the church, just looking at the lights and just like the small subtle details. Those things were amazing because like she knew it, like just the history of it, like the names. So just following her in that, and then just picking her brain about like things that she saw, in the community, while King did come here, going to like the stores that were there, that were running, that are fluent. And then that would tie me into the next person, which was Jimmy Lee. Um, Jimmy Lee was his story is very interesting just because, he was incarcerated, and he was just telling me how what helped him, to fight, a lot of the things that he was facing was learning how to play the game of chess. And that was just powerful because he was just saying chess is the game of life. And like just some of the things that he was sharing were just like golden nuggets for me. And then also me picking his brain about what businesses he remembered being in, on 16th Street, because his stories were, there were so many different businesses that were here. And now with us standing, which where his photo was taken, uh, with us standing there, it was a vacant lot, where, one of the businesses were. And then just talking about like how there's so many vacant lots over there now and how they were businesses. And for me, it again, because like I'm a person like, well, what business were there? What could it still thrive today? Is it still a necessity today if it was then? Like just really digging into history to look at the past to see if there's something we can learn to apply in the present to better the future. So just really talking to him and that and his story of being somebody who redemption, being able to be a man that was locked up, change his life, and now working with another organization that we work a lot with. uh it was just really powerful for me, to hear that and to see that he is really someone that changed his life and is giving back.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And UCAN is that great community organization based in North Lawndale. Uh, Thanks very much, Jay. And so Chelsea, similarly, your favorite interview, photo, impactful story, just to give us a sense of the content of the exhibition.
Sure. So just highlighting the incredible work that Jay did photographing our elders and our mentors, as we're calling them.
Mhm.
My favorite photo is of Mr. Charlie Wilson. It's just like the most amazing photo that captures the entire essence of this person in one still image. It's just like incredible, breathtaking work. The first time Jay showed it to us, I just was like in awe of how perfectly he captured Mr. Wilson. And so when we first mounted the exhibition, Mr. Wilson was front and center on the front side of the exhibition, right next to Lawndale, A Living History. It's a photograph of Mr. Wilson waving. And it just, the first time Jonathan and I stepped foot into North Lawndale to start doing this work, Mr. Wilson was our first contact, our first open arms, our first like friend in the neighborhood. And that image just like encapsulated everything about him. Now he's moved from our location over to CCA, which is a school in North Lawndale, where he does work. He goes there and he teaches chess to kids. And so it's now a beautiful sight to see him waving at all of the kids that come into the school. Just like absolutely breathtaking.
Mhm.
That picture, and then the picture of Charles Jenkins that's on the opposite side of the shipping container, is amazing. It's right in front of a sunflower. It's just like captures his essence entirely, and it's right in front of his house. And so it's kind of funny that he could step outside of his house every day and see this beautiful picture of himself. Looking back, it's just like perfect placement, perfect curation, perfect photography, absolutely amazing.
Great. Thank you, all three of you. You have done wonderful work.
Peter,
Yes, go ahead, Jonathan.
sorry, can I just highlight two other things?
Of course.
One other photo that I really just adore is also on the sort of most prominent face of the pop-up spot, and that is of Miss Barbara Stewart, who also had an amazing story and had photos that she had to share, and is just a wonderful presence in the neighborhood, really interested in art education, and working intergenerationally as well. Um, Her photo is not as intimate, but is her in front of her house that she's lived in for decades. And one of her stories is just the story of Black homeownership in North Lawndale, and how difficult that was for a long time and still continues to be, but how powerful it is for her as a senior to be able to um, be there. And so it's sort of her standing on her steps, um, almost uh, presiding over or protecting this piece of the neighborhood that she is uh, has stewardship over, for lack of a better term. So I really just, and it's just colors, and the perspective is really great too. The
All
other
right.
thing I want to highlight is our website. So, and Chelsea can talk a little bit about this, but we were really inspired by the American Medina. Am I saying it right?
Medina.
We were really
American Business.
inspired by the Chicago History Museum's American Medina exhibit, which in a much larger scale, did profiles of Chicago's Muslim community historically and in present day. And there's an interactive piece to that when we explored it, where you could just touch a photo and hear a story. And that sort of guided a lot of how we thought about implementing this exhibit. And so Chelsea did just some great work of making this beautiful website at www.lawndalePopUpSpot.org, where you can go and see the photo and hear the story, and read the biography of the person who's being profiled, or featured. And it's just a great way for, even if you're not in Chicago, even if you can't make it to North Lawndale, if you're isolating at home, or if you're halfway around the world, you can still get a lot of the experience, see these great photos, hear with your own ears these amazing stories, and just appreciate the great legacy and stories and lives of these individuals that we found and that found us.
Great. Thank you very much for all of you for those overviews. I'm wondering, an unscripted question, what does the future of the Lawndale pop-up spot hold for any one of you who would like to tackle that one?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of our community planning and then fundraising process right now. So it's looking like for our next year, we're hoping to have at least 3 exhibitions. Our headline exhibition, we're hoping to do around health, wellness, and community resilience. So thinking about hopefully by the summer having some resemblance of some sort of being able to be around other people. And I mean, something starting to come out of or see a light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic. One of the main things that people have told us that they really want to see from the Lawndale pop-up spot is a connection between the museum and the garden that it's situated in. So a connection between the shipping container and then the greater garden, which, as I mentioned before, is pretty big. So we're thinking about having this exhibition being about health and wellness, ways that you can keep yourself healthy, healthy eating, healthy living, but also thinking about resilience, and memorializing what we've been through over the past year, over the past several years. How do we come together? How do we heal? And how do we have good mental health. So we're thinking about that exhibition being pretty heavily event focused. So having people come in the garden, we're hoping that Jay's wife will come and do a cooking demo because she's a nutritionist, and show people how to cook the items that are in the garden in their own home, how to prepare food from the garden in their house. Thinking about ways to be mindful, mindfulness techniques, good mental health, those sorts of things. And then on the side of the shipping container or somewhere in the shipping container, we're hopefully on the outside, having a large scale mosaic of found items from the community. So taking items that were found in the community, broken glass, anything, just like making a mosaic out of the items in the community into something that represents healing. So that's our big focus for next year. We're also hoping to do another exhibition next year.
For this year.
Oh, this year. Oh my gosh, it's 2021. We're also hoping to do another exhibition this year about the connection between North Lawndale and Little Village. We've really been inspired by the Folding Map Project, as many people have everywhere. So we're thinking about what is the connection between North and South Lawndale, aka Little Village? What are the differences? What are the similarities? Bringing these two communities together.
Yeah, just the importance of Black-Brown organizing in, finding solidarity between marginalized communities in a multiracial city like Chicago, the importance of building bridges, and also some of the interesting historical connections, art, and there were some difficulties in 2020 between the two communities that made the news. So I think both people in both communities have expressed real interest in um, in persevering together, in finding the bonds, and so that's something that we're really interested in exploring with a lot of partners. And then we also have even more immediate exhibit. It'll be a short-term one, but we're working with the community racial equity movement called Equiticity. They work on justice issues and mobility justice, and profiling some of their community tours that they did in 2020 through photographs and storytelling as a way to kick off their 2021 community mobility, racial equity, and community tours projects. So that should be opening in May. And even before that, we're going to reopen Chicago Lawndale Living History so that people can not just come by and see the photos and hear the oral histories through the QR codes that are at the spaces, but we will have our doors open, limited amounts of time with, of course, masks and social distancing, but so that people can see some of the books that we have from the Chicago Public Library, the map that we have, the artifacts that were donated by the Living History featured elders and mentors, and the video that was done by a community videographer to help tell the stories as well.
All right. Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you both for the overview of programming for the Lawndale pop-up spot for this year, 2021. And to you, Jonathan, Jay, and Chelsea, wonderful work. I know this work can be very rewarding, also very exhausting, and add a pandemic on top of it can be very challenging as well. So thank you all for talking about the Lawndale pop-up spot and your exhibition, Lawndale Living History, and what's coming in the future.